Alright, welcome back. This will be episode 2. This concerned the Nile. And the best way to entertain yourself while you work is to sing. It was done then, and it's done today. The bringer of life, the River Nile. And let me know if you don't mind, Shada, if I should turn the subtitles off, because they are kind of big. It might kind of block some of the scenery.
Welcome to
back.
Bringer of Life, the River Nile.
I really wish they'd translate what they're singing. I've seen people singing that song with music, instruments playing. Okay, what I will do is turn off the subtitles. I think it might be under gameplay. I was wrong. How about sound? Poopy pants. Display? Language. There we go. Off. Subtitles. Off. I'm wondering if they can have none. Well, we'll see if that does it. Let's see if this gets her done for Horace.
The ancient Egyptians called the dark fertile soil of the Nile the Black Lands, and the surrounding desert was referred to as the Red Lands. The dramatic difference of productive land opposed to barren desert had a deep influence on cultural ideology, mythology, and religion.
Incidentally, the Egyptian word for black land was Kemet, and red land was Desheret. Probably sounded like Deshet when they said it quickly. Latin is the one that had been accredited with calling the desert, but I have a feeling for the thousands of years that the Egyptians called it Deshet, that they're the ones who named it.
The Nile determined much of Egyptian civilization. For example, the seasonal cycle of the Nile was so consistent that ancient Egyptians created their calendar around it. The flood season, or Akhet, was when the departing floodwaters left arable soil for crops. It was followed by the growing and harvesting seasons, known as Peret and Shemu. These regular seasons, along with abundant wildlife and rich soil, meant that Egypt's denizens were able to nourish themselves and ensure their country's strength in trade.
Phonetically, we spell what they called it as Desheret, Desheret, but Desheret is a rather lengthy way to say redland. So when you would say anything fast, probably was more like Deshet. or even desert. And nobody really knows for sure if they rolled their R's or not. But there is a presumption that they did.
The River Nile, flowing from the south to the north, neatly traversed through both Upper and Lower Egypt. All of Egypt's major cities were built along this narrow ribbon of life. Protected by mountain ranges and deserts which acted as natural barriers to enemies, and sustained by the Nile's plants and wildlife, Egyptian civilization enjoyed economic and cultural prosperity for over 4,000 years.
Yeah, it was quite a thing to cross that desert. And strategically, they kept much of their military forts around the Memphis area because they figured any invasion would come from the sea, the Nile Delta.
Both ancient Egyptians and ancient Greeks referred to the Nile as the river in their respective languages. Stretching a distance of over 6,700 kilometers, the Nile is one of the longest rivers in the world. It flows south to north, spanning 11 countries. The River Nile originates in the region of the Great Subequatorial Lakes, including one of the largest in the world, Lake Victoria near Tanzania.
And the reason why they call it the Black Land, or they called it the Black Land rather, was the soot, or the silt rather, very dark soil from the flooded Nile, and it was extremely fertile. And this fertility, with nutrient-rich soil, allowed them to grow much more food than they needed, and they were able to store plenty and to have things like an army and a priesthood. Both of those things don't really contribute to the economy except for soldiers who go to neighboring countries in order to plunder them and pillage. And that was why the soldiers did what they did. Egypt was not a peaceful country. They were always on the warpath.
The river flows through African equatorial forests, swamps, volcanic lands, steppes, and deserts, splitting apart for a while and picking up various sediments from each region and carrying them all the way to Egypt. Its main artery, known as the White Nile, rejoins with the Blue Nile in Khartoum. This is where it weaves through rich deposits of silt and nutrients, carrying them along in its wake.
Sometimes they were called the Blue Nile and the White Nile based on the contents of the water. The rich topsoil had a reddish appearance. Some said that it looked blood red. Green had some vegetation with it. So there was a lot of introduced mythology on top of that. But the Nile and the way the land was managed allowed Egypt to exist fairly homogeneously for over 5,000 years, which is longer than any other nation or civilization.
The Nile crosses 6 cataracts from the south to the north, creating natural obstacles between the various sections of the river. The cataracts are long zones of about 100 kilometers, where the bubbling and rapidly swirling waters advance tumultuously amid enormous heaps of rocks and benches of hard stone.
And you can bet that many a crew got stranded or killed trying to figure them out, or panicking. The sun's kind of going down, which is hurting the effect of the scenery. This, I think, might be winding down.
It is after crossing Nubia and the First Cataract that the river officially returns to Egypt in Aswan. There are still 1,000 kilometers before it reaches Cairo and the Delta, bringing life to those living on its shores before it eventually empties into the Mediterranean Sea.
A bit of trivia about Aswan. One of the things that Aswan is famous for, especially in terms of Egyptology, but even today, people buy granite from Aswan, and it has a pink appearance. The Egyptians used this granite to make a stele. I exclaimed something. But, the Rosetta Stone is made with Aswan granite. Aswan, A-S-W-A-N. But yeah, even today, people like to get, you pay a premium for it, but people like to get Aswan granite countertops. Probably even bathtubs or tile.
Ancient Egyptian irrigation and water use was centered around the Nile. However, they also had access to streams and rivers, as well as several large lakes. The Delta, situated at the north end of the Nile, also known as Lower Egypt, is a large irrigated area where the river splits into several tributaries,
which form the delta. It was they do look nice, and you pay a pretty penny for them. It was originally thought that the Rosetta Stone was black, but the only reason it was black was because, the French who first discovered it, they wanted to keep it, and the Brits basically put the rifle to their heads and says, nope, you can trace it, but you're not taking it home with you. Maybe not quite that eloquently, but they put ink on it and traced it so that they had something to go by. And it wasn't until less than 20 years ago, maybe? No, about 20 something, that they realized, oh, we can clean this off. That's ink. Oh, it's pink. It's in the 20th century.
The Delta had several major brackish coastal lakes, bodies of water separated from the sea by thin strips of land. A mix of deep to shallow waters, salt swamps, and sand plains, these lakes were refuge to a wealth of species, as well as water and land plants. The occasional bandit could also be found sheltering within the denser reeds, waiting for the unwary traveler.
This concludes the second tour. The next one will be coming up shortly, and that will be Deserts of Egypt. So till then,